Bill Gross, KGO. Good to have you with us. This hour is, we're dealing with the quake. We're dealing with the tsunami. We began the hour with Lori Dengler, who's an expert in tsunamis. She meant to be an expert in tsunamis. Rick Von Feldt, not so much. He's a partner of Future Workplace, and he is a survivor of the Phuket tsunami. Good to have you with us, Rick. How are you?
Hey, Gil. How are you?
I'm fine.
Like you also tired as I sat glued to the television late last night and watching NHK and all of the unfortunate things happening in Japan.
When the initial things I saw last night were shocking enough, this morning when I got up, I saw even more of a testament to how powerful these things. Last night, a lot of the shots were of the tsunami going over farm fields. Today, I saw a lot more of much more populated areas with houses and warehouses and washing across, major highways and all of this. I mean, as you were watching this, what does this bring back for you?
Well, it's emotional. You see it logically, but you also know emotionally what it was like. And for every single car, for every single house, I realized that there were people associated to every single one, and there were families associated to every single person in one of those houses. And so instantly, I can remember literally as we were on the beach and as this tsunami was coming at us in Phuket in Thailand, literally it was a hush sound of disbelief that this was coming at you, and then of course everybody just screaming. And you don't hear the screams when you're watching the television, but there are screams of both people involved in it as well as thousands of family members who realize that their family is somewhere near when all of that is happening.
As I remember, you had just really arrived there from California when, you got there not long before all of this happened.
That's correct. So just to refresh everybody's memory, this was in 2004, the day after Christmas on December 26th, the third largest recorded earthquake in history, with the epicenter happening in Sumatra. And the end result was 227,000 people died as a result of that earthquake. And, of course, millions of other survivors that happened. And for me personally, I was actually at that time working in Singapore and was on a plane that morning early to fly to Phuket for a couple of days of holiday between Christmas and New Year's, and had arrived. And while I was in the air on that flight, the earthquake had happened in Sumatra. So when I landed, and people felt it all throughout Southeast Asia, but nobody really said anything. And so I had jumped in a taxi, was heading towards my hotel, which was down on the bay of Patong in Phuket. And the road itself that led to my hotel on the other end of the beach, the other end of the beachfront, passes right in front of the large horseshoe bay that's in Patong Bay. And so the taxi driver was going down the road, and literally all traffic on that two-way road in front of the beach just all of a sudden came to a standstill, and everybody, especially the Thai folks, started speaking, in very alarmed language. And as we looked out into this large bay that was at least, a mile wide and half a mile deep, the water was all just very, very quickly disappearing, and the water pulled back, and it was a very strange thing. It had been, more than any recordable person living could see that it ever happened. The water had never been removed in that bay, and so there was a combination of two groups of people. There were individuals who were locals who ran down onto the beach because it was the first time they'd ever seen the ocean floor there without any water, and they were picking up things and making discoveries. And then unfortunately there was a whole another set of hundreds of people that were vacationers who were there early that morning. It was 9 a.m. with their families from all over Europe, Asia. And so there were kids and parents all playing and, playing around in the puddles, and the water pulled back. And different than what we saw on the television and what we're seeing through the videos from Japan, this was a subduction. Earlier, Lori was mentioning about the two kinds, or what happens in an earthquake. And in this case, the two tectonic plates glided over the top of each other, which caused motion downward. And when that motion downward happens, a sort of depression happens where water goes into that area, thereby pulling water away from coasts for a short period of time, only to then push it back up, which is when the wall of water comes back in. And so I don't think that we're seeing that this was a subduction, which meant that you just saw the rolling waves. And in this case, the water pulled out. People were tricked into it. You could look way out in the distance and see this kind of gray-looking wall, but your eyes played tricks with you because you weren't quite sure what it was.
And where it was. I've only got a couple of minutes, so let me you were talking about one of the things that we can't tell from the helicopter shots and all of that is what's going on in the ground. So what's going on the ground?
You know, the worst thing that's happening is that when the water comes, when you start to realize the water is moving, as everybody says, you have no chance. And I happen to be a very lucky man because the taxi driver's brother-in-law called him from way out in the distance and said, "Get your taxi off of the beach." And he literally ran for his taxi. I ran after him because my luggage was in the back of the taxi. And he drove up into the curb and drove 2 blocks quickly, dodging people. And literally as we got to the edge, it's when the water started to hit. But for everybody else, unless you have a way to run very quickly, you are in big trouble. And so 2 things that are really important. The first waves usually are not the biggest ones. They're deceptive because they're the first pushes. But in the same thing with the Sumatra tsunami, it was the second and the third wave that were twice or 3 times as big. And what's happening is that water is so full of debris that it's often not being drowned that hurts you. It's the amount of cars and tuk-tuks and glass and sort of a washing machine effect that's happening in the water that just hurts you or knocks you out or does bad things to you. And so people are screaming, everybody's running in different directions. People don't know whether they should run to buildings and try and climb. They don't know whether they should. If you try and run to the ends of beaches, to some cliffs, you'll never make it. And of course, the unfortunate thing is everybody thinks they're trying to grab stuff around them. You know, I got to keep this safe, I got to keep this safe, and you just need to drop everything and run. The other thing that's so important, you know, if I'm anywhere near a place now where I'm by water and there's an earthquake, there's no hesitation. I am moving to the highest possible point just because you never know what's going to happen. And a lot of people felt the earthquake and nobody knew. And, of course, unfortunately, back in 2004 in Southeast Asia, there weren't a lot of early detection systems, so people just didn't even know. People sitting on the beach didn't even know what was coming.
Rick, I've got to break because I have the news coming up. I thank you so much for sharing it. And you're right. You know, just the sentence you said about, you know, it's one thing to watch on television from a helicopter. It's another thing to be on the ground and hear the screams and the rush of the cars, the tuk-tuks, which, by the way, are those kind of motorized rickshaws that they have there, and all of that smashing into you. I thank you for being with us.
You're welcome, and our hearts go out to the folks in Japan and all of their families.
All right. Rick Von Feldt, who survived the tsunami in Phuket. We're going to check the news, and then we're going to talk to a California Assemblywoman, but we're not talking to her about anything political. We're going to talk to her about her time as a surgeon after the big tsunami in American Samoa and get an idea of what's ahead for the people of Japan. Into the KJO Newsroom first, Brett Burkhardt.
Good afternoon, Gil. Continuing coverage of the quake and tsunami. You've been talking about one of the big concerns over the nuclear power plant 170 miles northeast of Tokyo. A power failure knocked out the reactor's cooling system. Japan has just issued a state of emergency at another nuclear power plant after a cooling system failed there as well. Rescue crews say they can't even reach the area along the coast where they say 200 to 300 people were killed. They say the roads are just too badly damaged. Hundreds more are missing. The number of injured has reached nearly 1,000. A large section of one town of 70,000 people has just been burning. Damage from the tsunami in California has led to an emergency proclamation by Governor Jerry Brown. He's declared a state of emergency for 4 counties, including Del Norte, Humboldt,